It's 2025 and I'm sitting in front of a video camera, so maybe it's time for my first video of the new year. Hey everyone, it's Ray and welcome to my little bookish corner of the world where I talk about everything related to books. I was a little quiet towards the end of the year, though hopefully you have seen my videos on Rivals and my top 10 and bottom 5 reads of 2024. But if you haven't, I will link them up there somewhere and below so you can check them out. In the meantime, in my first video of this year, I am going to be talking about my participation in 25 books for 2025. Now, that doesn't mean I'm just going to read 25 books. My intention is that many of these 25 books are going to be those that have been on the shelf for a while, or I've been saying I'm going to read for a fair amount of time. That's not to say every single book is going to be like that, but I'm also going to be using my 1-star review jar and hopefully going to be picking out 3 books from here that are not already on my unread list that I put together in a panic of, oh, which books haven't I read? Which ones do I want to read? And I'm not putting books on here like Quicksilver or Onyx Storm, which I know I'm going to read, because that's not the intention for this particular list. The intention is to pick books that maybe would have stuck on the shelf for a while, or I have had on the shelf for a while in some cases. One of them is a reread that I haven't read since 2011, and I have been intending to reread for probably 2 or 3 years. So that is my goal. So let's get started with that one. The first book on the list is Her Radiant Curse by Elizabeth Lim. Last year I read The Dragon's Promise and Six Crimson Cranes, and Her Radiant Curse is apparently the prequel to these 2 books. The cover is gorgeous. I ended up getting a special edition, which means I've had it since August 2023. I believe that's what it says on my list. August 2023, it's been on my shelf since. So it's been there for over a year, which puts it in the category of I should maybe have already read it instead of buying a load more books, but I didn't. So I am really looking forward to that. It's the story of her stepmother and how she became the woman she was, who ended up cursing our main character in Six Crimson Cranes. Oh, and her brothers, of course. The second book is a prize winner from last year, very, very short book, and that is Orbital by Samantha Harvey. I actually received this as part of my Christmas haul. I put books on my Christmas list this year, and this was one of the ones I received. There's another one on here that I also received as a Christmas gift. So it's only been on my shelf for less than 2 weeks. However, I have admittedly already read Orbital. I was very busy yesterday. I really wanted to get a book read, and I thought it might be quite a nice introduction to reading in the new year. And I enjoyed it. It was an interesting observation of life and the passing of time from 6 cosmonauts and astronauts on the space station as they watch the world and a typhoon is moving in to which ends up destroying a considerable amount of land. And it's all about their observations of life in general. I really found it a lyrical book. It was beautifully written. It wasn't that long, 136 pages. And I can see why it won a prize, though I'm probably the first person to say I don't really rate a book because it's won a prize, the same as, oh, it's an Oscar winner. That doesn't make any difference. If I'm not interested in watching it or I don't enjoy it, whether it won a prize or not is irrelevant. I've read a few Booker Prize winners and Booker Prize nominees that I truly enjoyed, and then I've read others that I didn't. A perfect example of that is The Colour, which was nominated, good Lord, probably 17 years ago. And I really didn't enjoy it. I'm going to bring a picture up because I cannot remember the author. I just remember I did not enjoy the book. The next book on my list is Medea by Rosie Hewlett. I had a bit of a fantasy and mythology year. Well, I've had a few mythology years over the last decade, and Medea is one that I was truly looking forward to. I've got the special edition from Waterstones, which has Medea printed down the side. It's a really beautiful book, and I purchased it in March 2024. So it's been stuck on my bookcase, and I don't know why I keep on overlooking it, but this year is going to be its year. I am going to pick it up and read it. It's the story of Medea, and if you know anything about the story of Medea, she was married to Theseus. Editing Ray just popping in here to correct myself. She was not married to Theseus, she was married to Jason. You know, he of the Argo and the Argonauts fame. And where she was a sorceress, and when Theseus and her were having massive marital issues and he was threatening to leave her, she killed their children. So it's not going to be an easy book to make her the heroine, whether you get her well, obviously we're going to get her backstory, but it's never going to be easy to justify the things that she did, whereas Clytemnestra, you could understand why she killed Agamemnon. You really can. And I am going to definitely say, if you enjoy mythology, still do pick up Clytemnestra. Came out in 2023, but I'm talking about my reads for 2025, and Medea is number 3 on the list, and I purchased that back in March 2024. The next book is a new release. In fact, it doesn't come out until the end of this month, and that is The Queen of Fives by Alex Hay. I really enjoyed The Housekeepers that I read last year, and I'm participating in a book tour. So my review for The Queen of Fives will be on my website and my socials as of the beginning of February. I'm really looking forward to it. I enjoy Alex Hayes' style, the heist, the theft organization. It's kind of Ocean's 8 because women are central characters in the books, and he's just got a really good way with writing, so I enjoy it greatly. Obviously, that one doesn't come out until the end of this month. However, I received my copy at the end of November 2024. Another book that I received in November 2024 is The Courting of Bristol Keats by Mary E. Pearson. Now, I've put this one on my list because I have watched and listened to and read so many conflicting reviews on this book that if I let those influence me too much, I will never pick the book up. It will stay on my shelf for an eternity. And this time next year, this time 2027, I will still be, oh, I've got that book on my list. It's on my shelf. I plan on reading it. So I figured that I may as well put it on the list. It's quite a chunky book. I got another special edition from Waterstone, so it's a very nice looking book, but I'm not going to let that influence me because you cannot judge a book by its cover, and I'm trying to move away from that this year because I've done that. I'm very guilty of doing that. Oh, that's a really pretty book, I'm going to buy it, and then it just sits on the shelf for an eternity. So The Courting of Bristol Keats by Mary E. Pearson has gone on this list because I know that if I go by the reviews that I've been hearing primarily on YouTube and on podcasts, I will never pick it up. So that is The Courting of Bristol Keats, book number 5 on my list. And yeah, otherwise it's not going to get read. The next one is another new release. It comes out in February next year. Well, this year. Forgetting we're now in 2025. It comes out in February 2025, and that is The Sirens by Amelia Hart. I absolutely adored Wayward when it came out back in February 2023, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. I recommended it to a lot of people. It appeared on one of my countdowns at the end of 2023, and I think that there is something about Amelia Hart's writing that I find absorbing. She really gets to the depth of emotion with her characters, and that's why I couldn't not put this on the list. I would have read it anyway, as I did Wayward, but I think that having this on the list makes it look a little bit less like I'm punishing myself when I look at some of the other books that are on here that I have had on here for a while, even though they have been highly rated by a number of people. And you'll see what I mean when I get to book number... I'm looking through my list and going, book number 10. When I get to that book, you'll see what I mean. So book number 7 is Dragon Rider by Taran Matharu. This is a book in a series. It's the first book in a series. And I received my copy in April 2024. It's been on the shelf for a while. I do enjoy dragon books. I've read a number of them over the last 12 months or so. So it's going to be one of those that I know I will enjoy once I get down to it. But I think I've been kind of intimidated by the size. It looks huge. And especially towards the end of the year, I was looking to read thinner, quicker books. Far easier to read than the really chunky books that are on my shelf. And there are a considerable number of them, if you can see this way behind me. I can't even think. This way behind me. Looking at the camera, you cannot tell where you're going. So I'm going to be going this way, this way. It is this way behind me. You'll see quite a number of really chunky books. And I want to get through some of them this year because I've got an amazing TBR, but I'm just not reading through it. I'm buying new books, getting new books. Obviously, on the 25th of this month, the third book in the Empyrean series comes out, Onyx Storm, and I know that I'm going to read that quickly, which is why that is not on this list. So number 7 is Dragon Rider by Taran Matharu, and I'm looking forward to reading it. I've just got to sit down and pick it up. Book 8 is another relatively new one. I received a proof of this, and that is Death on the Red Sea by C.L. Miller. It is the sequel to The Antique Hunter's Guide to Solving Murder, and I really enjoyed that book, so I'm very happy to have the sequel. It's one that I've been looking at and thinking I'm going to buy this anyway, so getting that and putting it on this list is because I'm trying to get into a habit of reading my proofs a little bit earlier in the year or closer to when I get them. I've got a few proofs on my shelf that I've had since the beginning of 2024 and haven't opened, and I think that's really bad. So I'm going to, for me personally, anybody else can do what they want, so I'm going to pick up a few of those, and I've shoved those on the list so I read them in relatively good time. Number 9 is Annie Bot by Sierra Greer. I've had that on the shelf since the 7th of since July 2024, so not that long. It's been 5 months, nearly 6 months. By the time I get round to it, it could be a year, who knows. This list is going to last me a year, but the intention to read it is there. It's not a massive book, and I found the premise quite interesting. I spoke with a friend who'd purchased it and she'd enjoyed it, so I thought, that sounds like a pretty good book to read. So I went out, purchased it myself, and then stuck it on the shelf, and there it has stayed. So that's definitely one that I want to read. And it's also rounding out the category. So not one of the things I really wanted to do this year was not just read fantasy in any way or form. I've got a lot of fantasy. I enjoy the genre, but I do like to branch out into other genres at certain points. So having books like Annie Bot and Orbital and Death on the Red Sea and the next book is going to help me to spread my wings just a little bit more and talk about something other than fantasy. So book 10 is the controversial one. Not controversial because it's on the list, but controversial because it's been recommended to me so many times, and I purchased it when it came out in paperback and then put it on the shelf, and it has stayed there. Every once in a while I look at it and I think maybe I'll pick that up. Even my friend Hazel, who is the friend who passed away last year, loved the book and kept on saying to me, you've got to read this, you'll really enjoy it. And I still didn't pick it up. And that is Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmus. It's been on the shelf for 18 months, since June 2023. And I do admittedly take it off the shelf when I'm reshelving all my books, and I look at it and I read the back of it, and then it goes right back on the shelf again. And I'm not sure why. I'm not resistant to reading it. It's just not a book that is speaking to me. And I'm not sure if it's because it's the genre or because I've seen part of the miniseries, which shouldn't have put me off because apparently it's really good, or what. But I am really struggling with it. So I figured putting it on this list doesn't put pressure on me to read it, but it encourages me to read it. The next book is the one that has been on my shelf for the longest. It is also my only reread on this list. One of the things I'm trying to encourage myself to do is I keep books on the shelf. I don't get rid of books that I enjoy, so why am I not rereading them? Last year I reread 3 books. 3 books. Out of all of the books that I love on my shelf, I reread just 3. I'm going to try and increase that this year. I want to more than double it, because I think that rereading a book, if I'm going to keep it on the shelf, why am I not picking it up again? So this book, A Visit from the Goon Squad by Jennifer Egan, which I've had on the shelf since June 2011, and I have read once since I purchased it, is going to be my reread on this list. I am going to put a few more intention rereads in a box and pick them out as and when. But I'm going to try and reread books that have been on the shelf for a while. I have 4 more shelves around my flat, and I'm going to go round, just randomly pick, as long as they're the first in a series or they're not in a series at all. I'm just going to randomly pick titles, put them in another jar like this one, and then once a month I'm going to pick out a reread so that I can enjoy a book that I obviously enjoyed at an earlier point. And if I don't enjoy it when I reread it, it will go on the unhaul shelf, which I'm looking at right now, and it's incredibly big. It's an entire shelf at this moment in time. So I will then put it on the unhaul shelf, will make more space for another book, and I can move things around. And I think that's going to be a really good experience for me this year. Book 12 is Brat by Andrew McCarthy. It is, again, I'm trying to spread my wings. It is the autobiography of Andrew McCarthy, the actor who was in 16 Candles and St Elmo's Fire. No, not 16 Candles, Pretty in Pink and St Elmo's Fire. How embarrassing, I got that wrong. And it is all about his life after his experience of being named as a member of the Brat Pack, which is something that he found quite upsetting and believes destroyed his career back in the 80s. Obviously, if you watch documentaries, you will have seen Brats, the documentary that appears in the UK on Disney Plus and elsewhere on Hulu. And that is essentially a documentary version of his autobiography. I've had that on the shelf since February last year, and I felt that, again, it was another way to spread my wings and read something else. I'm not a big reader of memoirs and non-fiction, so this, again, is going to be a new experience for me, and I think that's a good thing. Have you read it, though? Because I'd be very interested in talking to anybody who has read this book, because I have thoughts on the documentary, and many of them are to do with how self-indulgent it was. But each to their own. Book 13 is a different take on Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, and I really enjoyed that book. I've read it multiple times, and I kind of have a connection with it in that my mother's family name before they changed it was Frankenstein. So I'm not giving you information that's personal detail that can be used for my bank. They changed their name, but it was Frankenstein. So that book is Our Hideous Progeny by C.E. McGill, and I've had this on my bookcase since May 2023. It's an intriguing story, an unusual interpretation of the story, and I couldn't resist it. it was recommended by a group of people, not just one, a group of people, all who said that they enjoyed it. They thought it was very well written, a great interpretation of the Frankenstein story written by Shelley, and they thought that it would be one that I'd enjoy. So I picked that one, and then it stuck on the shelf for 19 months. So that is going to be a book for this year as well, because it's been there long enough. And if I don't enjoy it, somebody else will, but at least I will have read it. I think that's the thing. I'm looking at my books now as a way of, if I don't enjoy it, I'm not going to keep it just because it looks pretty or just because it fills a gap on the bookcase. I am going to be very, very strict with myself. I have a lot of books, as you can see behind me, and there's a shelf that goes all the way around the room, which I cannot show you because this camera is not very friendly to being moved. But I also have 4 other bookcases, so it's not as though I'm going to be going short. Book number 14 is the second book I received as part of my Christmas haul, and that is The Lathe of Heaven by Ursula Le Guin. Now, I read Le Guin years ago, probably when I was back at school, so at least 3 decades and a bit ago. However, I hadn't read any of hers for a very long time, and I was reading an article and a review of another book, and this particular book was mentioned, and I thought, I want to read that. So I put it on my Christmas list, not thinking anything of it, and then I felt one of my parcels, and it's like, oh, this is a book. But it's a very thin book, and I don't remember putting loads of thin books on my Christmas list. So I opened it and I thought, oh, I have not read that. So The Lathe of Heaven by Ursula Le Guin has only been on my shelf for 2 weeks at this point, and it is going on this list because it's rounding it out a little bit more. She's one of the original fantasy science fiction writers. She wrote a number of incredible novels, and this one was apparently massively up there, and it isn't one I've read before, so this will not be a reread. Book number 15 on the list hasn't been on my shelf for that long. I purchased it back in October 2024, shortly prior to speaking with Alex Pavesi about his second novel, Ink Ribbon Red. I think this is going to be an interesting one. It's going to be a way for me to watch the development of his writing, having already read his second novel. And I like the idea of the way that the story has been written. So I'm going to post a link this way for the interview with Alex Pavesi. I'll also post a link to the podcast in the info box below. And I'm going to enjoy reading 8 Detectives. Book number 16 has been on my shelf since April 2023. It's another one that I purchased from an independent bookseller because it was a beautiful special edition. It had different colourway to the one that was being sold on sites like Amazon and Waterstones, and that is Death of a Bookseller by Alice Slater. I keep on intending to read it. I keep on pulling it off the shelf, like many others that I've been talking about, and I just thought, well, if I put it on this list, I will definitely read it. If I don't enjoy it, then again, it goes on the unhaul. If I do enjoy it, it stays on the shelf in its beautiful lime green and luminous pink cover. And also, I've heard very mixed reviews. Again, there have been so many books that are on this list that I've heard such mixed reviews for. Some people are saying how incredible it is. Other people are saying it really wasn't for me. I found it quite trite. There's so many tropes in it. But at the same time, I enjoy tropes. So who's to say that I'm not going to be one of those people that sits there and says, I really enjoyed this book. I liked the way that this particular plot point was dealt with. I enjoyed the tropes that were used. And I think the characters were well developed. Who knows? I won't know until I've actually read the book. Book number 17, I'm heading back to mythology as I was with book number 3, and that is For the Most Beautiful by Emily Hauser. I've had this on the shelf only since June 2023, when I purchased all 3 books in the series, which you can actually see behind me here. And they are stunning covers. It is the story of the lead up to the Trojan War, including the reason why Paris was actually given Helen by Aphrodite when he gifted her with the golden apple as the most beautiful. Hence the title For the Most Beautiful. Again, this has been on my shelf for 18 months. I did pick it up and start reading it when I first received it because I heard so many things about, oh, if you like mythology, you will enjoy these books. It wasn't that I didn't enjoy it at the time, but another book arrived that I really wanted to read. So, yeah, that's why I haven't finished it, which is kind of bad, really. Book 18 is Lula Dean's Little Library of Banned Books by Kirsten Miller. I absolutely loved The Change, which came out in 2023 by Kirsten Miller. And when I heard about this book, the Little Library of Banned Books, and the way it was being marketed was incredibly clever, but also the idea of the story with Lula Dean, who is massively disapproving of anything she feels shouldn't be read by anybody, that she creates a library that is full of all the books she approves of. And people start replacing these books with banned books, hence the title Little Library of Banned Books. The storyline really intrigues me. It gives me a little chuckle, and I enjoy because I like the way that Kirsten Miller writes, having read The Change and really identified with her characters. I know that this one is going to be an amazing read. But again, it's been on my shelf for 6 months, and in that time I haven't picked it up, so I figured this would be a good way to make me pick it up. But again, these are books that I can read at any point during the year. There are 52 weeks, 25 books. That's less than one book every other week. It's not doing too bad. The next one, in fact, the next three are definitely fantasy novels. The City of Stardust by Georgia Summers, I've had on my shelf since January last year, so it's been on the shelf for 12 months. I've again heard very mixed reviews about it. I received my copy as part of a Fairy Loot subscription, which I have since cancelled because I had this insane idea that I was going to absolutely love everything that came because it was going to be so beautiful. And I ended up reaching the point where I'd used all of my skips and had unhauled 8 of the books that I've received in 12 months. So it was financially not worth it. It was one of those subscriptions where sometimes you get a book that you like. I've found Ghostsmith and Bonesmith, for example. Bonesmith was a subscription book in 2023. It was fantastic. I then went out and purchased Ghostsmith for myself when that was released and read it straight away because I really enjoyed the first book. But that is the exception, not the rule. And I was finding that I was just hoping for more skips, and Fairy Loot only gives you 4. So unfortunately, that was a subscription I cancelled, and The City of Stardust is one of my remaining books on the shelf that I have received from that subscription that I haven't read. So I'm going to go into it not exactly expecting loads because of what I have heard. But then again, it could be a book that I really enjoy. It could be something that goes straight on the unhaul shelf after I've read it, but it could be something that goes back on the shelf. It is a beautiful copy, but again, that doesn't mean anything. The next one, book 20, is Of Jade and Dragons by Amber Chen. This was my first ever Illumicrate book, and I received it in June 2024. So I'm really looking forward to reading this. It's Chinese mythology, it's dragons, it's got everything I could like in it. The cover's stunning, the naked hardback is stunning. Again, doesn't mean very much, but I have found myself enjoying a lot of Asian mythology with the dragons and the shapeshifters and the gods and everything. And I think they are so well written. I have to hark back to Elizabeth Lim, Six Crimson Cranes, The Dragon's Promise. So well written that I cannot help but judge it by my experience of those particular books. and hope that it lives up to the expectation I have of it. Book 21 is Daughter of the Moon Goddess by Su Lin Tan. Though I have a hard copy, I didn't purchase it until February 2024, when I also bought the sequel, and I am looking forward to reading both of these. Again, they are Asian or Chinese mythology. They are the sort of thing that I am finding myself in the era of at this moment in time. So I am looking forward to reading this. I will probably then pick up the sequel, as I have done with a few of the books that were on my 24 for 24 last year. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that one. And the next one is the last of my pre-selected, and that is Thieves' Gambit by Kavian Davis. I am not sure about this. I have purchased the sequel, and that is one of the reasons why this went on my list. I entered this. There is a story behind my purchase of this particular book. I went out, I was going to the hospital last year. I had a few operations done at the beginning of the year. Lucky me. I am hoping not to repeat it this year, because that is not my idea of fun. And as I was on my way to the hospital, I decided to make an appointment to get my ears re-pierced because the holes had healed up. Yes, this is going to be a really boring Ray has a life story. And I decided that I was going to get my ears pierced. I'd made an appointment, went to get my appointment, and found out that the person who was supposed to be doing it was sick. They offered me an appointment at exactly the same time as my hospital appointment, so I had an hour and a half to kill. So I went wandering and ended up in the Works, where they had a red sprayed edge edition of Thieves' Gambit. The cover intrigued me. I was looking around the shelves and I couldn't really find much that I wanted to read. I did have a book in my bag already that I was midway through, so it wasn't as though I was going to take it to the hospital and read it while I was waiting. But I thought to myself, oh, this looks quite good. It looks interesting. And it's almost like, well, it's a YA novel, and the main character is part of a thieves organisation, and she takes part in a competition. And she has competition in the form of a potential love interest, maybe. The sequel is going to continue it on. But I thought that looks quite interesting, and I do love this bright red colour. It's vibrant, it stands out, and I think that's the thing with a book cover. Sometimes you look at something and it could be absolutely horrific, and I'm looking at The Ministry of Time right here. Kaylee Ann Bradley, lovely cover, did not enjoy the book at all. But it didn't appear on my bottom 5 of 2024 because there were way too many awful books in that year, and I'm going to post a video link up there. So I thought, oh, that looks really intriguing. The colour's very bright, and I ended up buying it. It was on special offer. The Works, if you aren't aware and you don't live in the UK, The Works is a brilliant place to get lower cost books. It tends to be books where they've places have overordered and they get the excess, or they have special editions, as they did last year with Seven Summers by Page Toon. They had a sprayed edge edition, so it's reaching the point where they are actually getting their own editions. They have a lot of books in there. Our Works is incredibly small, and it doesn't have as many books as many others do, because apparently the stock goes by the local area and what sells. Hopefully more people are going to start using the Works in my town, and it will start getting more books. But anyway, so I saw Thieves' Gambit, thought bright red, really, really stood out, read the back of the book and thought, that sounds quite interesting, and then stuck it on the shelf, and it stayed there ever since. So that is a January 2024 book, and I am going to read probably both of them this year because they're not massive books and they look interesting. It's going to be a nice relaxation escape from something more serious or a day at work. So now we get to the bit that I'm kind of a bit anxious about, if only because I don't know if I'm going to pick something out of here that is already on this list, which is highly possible. I didn't do a book pick for December last year because I had a lot to read. I just lost my job. My friend had just passed away and I was preparing for Christmas. So reading as many as I did in that month was a bit of a miracle. I did get my last book of the year read 20 minutes before midnight. As always, it was a Joanna Lindsay and it was Man of My Dreams, which is a complete bodice ripper. If ever you've seen one, it was written and released in 1992 and then republished in 1995 with the beginning of the sequel. And my copy is from 1995. But anyway, that was my read for New Year's Eve. So I got my figures done and I ended up reading 132 books. I have set a target for this year of 63 books because who knows what's going to happen. So I always set a lower number. And then if I read more, it's a bonus. And I also set a page challenge of 20,013 pages. Again, I will hopefully surpass that, but you never know. But on with the selection of the final 3 books for the 25 for 2025. Again, it's not the only books I'm going to read this year because obviously I've got Quicksilver and I've got Onyx Storm and I have got Faithbreaker and a few others that I really want to read and will read as soon as they arrive, hence them not going on this list. Okay, so book number... I expected historic fiction and got smutty softcore porn. Okay, number 16. The Wolf Den. I have already read this one. I read this last year. So that's one to take out of the jar. This may well be the case with quite a few because obviously there are books that I read that I didn't pull out of the jar and there are books that I have put on this list already. Melodramatic and overblown and completely unbelievable, book number 28. The Maiden by Kate Foster. Again, I read this last year. This was on my 24 for 24. Going really well so far. Can't tell if I'm dumb or the book is just poorly written. Book 23. A Spoonful of Murder. I have not read that one yet. So A Spoonful of Murder is book number 23 and it is book number 23 on this list as well. $32. It's like the Kardashians of books, all hype with no real substance. Crooked Kingdom by Leigh Bardugo. Because I've already read Six of Crows, I did put the sequel on my list. So that will finish out that duology. Crooked Kingdom. I don't like that review very much because I know that her books are really good, especially that particular series. I absolutely love that particular series. The characters are amazing. And the final book, guaranteeing of course it's not already been read. Characters have no chemistry together. Female character is pretty clear with her boundaries and male character flirts by ignoring them. Book number 39. Maggie Moves On by Lucy Score. So that they are very, very different books. That's quite good that I've picked out. Yes, that means that I've cleared out a couple of the books that I had already read, so I won't pick them out again. And I've picked 3 books that are very different. I have got a contemporary romance, a fantasy, and a cozy mystery. And that rounds out my list for 2025 quite neatly. So have you picked any of these books out? Have you read any of these books? Should I put anything to the top of the list that I haven't already sort of gone, I'm going to read that immediately? I know that the next book on my planned list is Quicksilver. Yes, that's not on this list, but I have read one of the books on this list already. So I'm kind of ahead of the game, just a little bit. at this moment in time. Who's to say that come the end of the year, I'm not going to be scrabbling madly as I was in 2024, where I still had 5 of my 24 for 24 to read and started a mad dash of, I've got to read this, I've got to read this, I've got to read this. So I finished them because I had reached the point. I ended up reading the last book on my list, which was The Wolf Den by Elodie Harper. It was the last of my 24 for 24. And I ended up finishing that on Christmas Eve. That's how finally I cut it. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me. I wish everybody a fantastic 2025. I start my brand new job on Monday, the 6th of January. I cannot wait for that either. It's been an interesting 2024, and I'm hoping that 2025 brings with it incredible things for everybody. So I'm now going to head off, pick up my next book, and sit on the only comfy spot in my sofa because I'm getting a new one in a couple of months. I've already ordered it. Thank God. It is so uncomfortable sitting on a sofa where the springs have gone. And I will see you all in the next one. Bye.